Two children vanish off the face of the earth. Their mother is on a tropical vacation. And when police ask where her kids are, she smiles and says, "Everything is fine." Welcome to Abyss of Crime, where we shine a light on the darkest corners of human behavior. Today, we are diving into one of the most disturbing cases in recent American history. A mother, a doomsday cult, and two innocent children who never stood a chance. Here is what we are going to cover today. We are going to meet 7-year-old JJ and 16-year-old Tylee. We are going to watch their mother spiral into a world of apocalyptic prophecy. We are going to follow investigators as they chase a woman across state lines. And we are going to find out exactly what happened to those two kids. Spoiler: it is worse than you think. This case grabbed national headlines for one reason. Nobody could believe a mother could do this. Nobody wanted to believe it, but the evidence does not lie. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly how this happened and why it took so long for anyone to stop it. We are also going to look at something the mainstream coverage largely skipped. The warning signs were everywhere. Family members raised the alarm. Former friends spoke out. And still, the system failed these children at almost every single turn. Lori Vallow was not always the woman you see in courtroom footage. She was a cheerleader. She was a church volunteer. She was, by all accounts, a fun and energetic mom. So what changed? And get this, the transformation did not happen overnight. It was slow, it was deliberate, and it was fueled by a man who told her God had given her a special mission. That man's name is Chad. Remember that name. By the time anyone with real authority stepped in, JJ and Tylee had already been gone for months. Bodies were buried in Chad Daybell's backyard in Salem, Idaho. Lori gave interviews and posted beach photos. This is the story of how a mother traded her children's lives for a fantasy about the end of the world. It is the story of a system that got it wrong until it was far too late. And it is the story of two kids who deserved so much better. Subscribe now, and let's get into it. But before we go anywhere else, you need to know who these children actually were. Let's talk about the kids, because this is their story first. Tylee Ryan was 16 years old. She was bright. She was stubborn in the best way. She loved photography and had a real eye for it. People who knew her described a teenager who was fiercely protective of her little brother. She did not suffer fools, and she was not afraid to speak her mind. Tylee had already been through more than most kids her age. Her biological father had a documented history of abuse. She had watched her mother cycle through multiple men. But through all of it, Tylee stayed close to the people she loved. She was the kind of big sister who showed up every single time. Then there was JJ. Joshua Jackson Vallow was 7 years old. He had been adopted as an infant. Jake had autism. He was nonverbal at times. He needed routine. He needed stability. He needed someone in his corner every single day. And by every account, JJ was pure joy. People who met him once never forgot him. He had this enormous personality. He loved superheroes. He loved making people laugh. His grandparents, his aunts, his cousins, they all adored him. These were not statistics. These were real kids with real lives and real futures ahead of them. Now let's talk about September 8th, 2019. That is the last day anyone outside of Lori's immediate circle saw Tylee Ryan alive. The family visited Yellowstone National Park. There are photos from that trip. Tylee is smiling. JJ is goofing around. It looks like a perfectly normal family outing. It was not. Within days of that trip, Tylee was gone. The very next day after Yellowstone, calls went up. Plans were canceled. And JJ's school in Rexburg, Idaho was told he would not be coming back. His school was told he was living with a relative in American Fork, Utah. That was a lie. Nobody checked. For weeks, JJ's grandmother, Kay Woodcock, tried to reach him. She called, she texted, she got excuses every single time. Lori told her JJ was safe, and then Lori stopped responding altogether. Kay did not stop. She escalated. She contacted authorities. She contacted the media. She refused to let this go. And if it were not for her refusal to accept the lies, this case might have stayed buried even longer. Think about the last normal moment those kids had, smiling for the camera at a national park. And somewhere nearby, the person who was supposed to protect them was already planning what came. So who exactly was Lori Vallow? And how did she become capable of this? To understand what happened to those children, you need to understand the months leading up to their By 2018, Lori Vallow was deep into a religious built around Chad Daybell. Chad was an author. He wrote obscure end times fiction. He ran a small podcast. And he had developed a theology completely detached from any mainstream faith. Chad taught that certain people were what he called dark or zombies. He meant that literally. His belief system held that some souls had been replaced by evil spirits. And those people, in his framework, were essentially beyond saving. Lori bought into this completely. Now here is where it turns criminal. On July 11, 2019, Lori's husband, Charles Vallow, was shot and killed in Chandler, Arizona. The shooter was Lori's own brother, Alex Cox. Alex told police it was self-defense. He claimed Charles had attacked him with a baseball bat. No charges were filed at the time. Here is what you need to know about Charles Vallow. He had already filed for divorce before his death. He had told family members he believed Lori was mentally unwell. He had raised specific concerns about her relationship with Chad Daybell. He had stated on record that he was worried about JJ's safety. He was right, and he did not live to see it proven. Within 2 months of Charles's death, Lori relocated to Rexburg, Idaho, where Chad Daybell lived with his wife Tammy. On October 19, 2019, Tammy Daybell died at home. She was 49 years old. She had no known serious health conditions. Local authorities initially ruled it natural causes. 2 weeks later, Chad Daybell married Lori Vallow. Alex Cox, the brother who shot Charles and was never charged, died in Arizona on December 12, 2019. The official cause was a blood clot. He was 49 years old. He died before investigators could question him further. 3 people connected to Lori Vallow died within 5 months of each other: her husband, her husband's replacement's first wife, and her own brother. And through all of it, 2 children were missing, and nobody in authority had yet connected the dots. Rexburg police made contact with Lori in late November 2019. She said JJ was with a family friend. She could not give a name. She could not give an address. She said she would provide details later. She never did. Instead, within days, Lori and Chad flew to Kauai, Hawaii. They posted photos online. They looked relaxed. They looked happy. And somewhere back in Idaho, 2 children lay buried in the backyard of a man who had convinced their mother they were already lost. But here is the question nobody could answer yet. How did investigators finally catch up to her? Let's talk about what it actually took to find. By December 2019, Rexburg Police Department had opened a formal missing persons investigation. But here is the problem. Lori and Chad were in Hawaii. The children were gone. and investigators were working across multiple states with limited coordination. Kay Woodcock, JJ's grandmother, was not waiting around. She had already contacted the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. She was calling local news stations. She was posting on social media. She was doing the job that should have been done months earlier by people with badges and authority. The Rexburg police officially named JJ and Tylee as missing on December 20th, 2019. That is over 3 months after Tylee was last seen alive. Here is what investigators started piecing together. Phone records showed that Lori and Alex Cox had been in constant contact in the days surrounding Charles Vallow's death back in Chandler, Arizona. The self-defense story had never been properly pressured. Now, detectives in multiple jurisdictions were looking at Alex Cox as a central... Then, Alex Cox. On December 12, 2019, just days before the children were officially named missing, Alex died of what was initially reported as natural causes in Gilbert. His death was later found to be caused by blood clot. Investigators noted the timing. They noted it very carefully. With Alex gone, the direct link between Lori and the deaths of Charles Vallow and potentially the children became harder to trace through. But forensics does not die. The police issued a court order in January 2020 requiring Lori to produce the children within 5 days. She did not come. A warrant was issued for her arrest on 2 felony counts of desertion and non-support of dependent. Lori and Chad stayed in Kauai. They hired an attorney. They said nothing. Meanwhile, investigators in Idaho started looking hard at Chad Daybell's property in Salem. Cadaver dogs had been brought in. The dogs alerted. But without a solid probable cause foundation, investigators could not yet execute a full... Here is the thing about cadaver dogs. They do not alert for nothing. Law enforcement knew something was there. The question was how to build the case fast enough before any evidence was moved or federal authorities got involved. The FBI joined the investigation. Now there were resources that local law enforcement simply did not have. Travel records, financial records, digital forensics across multiple... One detail that emerged early was chilling. Security camera footage from Lori's apartment complex in Rexburg showed JJ being brought inside on the evening of September 22nd. That was the last time he appeared on any camera anywhere. He was 7 years old. He walked that building, and he never walked back out. Investigators now had a likely last known location and a tight window. What they needed next was physical evidence, and it was already waiting for them just beneath the surface of Chad Daybell's June 9th, 2020, everything broke open. Investigators executed a search warrant at Chad Daybell's property in Salem, Idaho. They brought cadaver dogs, they brought forensic excavation teams, and within hours of starting that search, they found human remains buried on the grounds. 2 sets of remains. One in a pet cemetery area near the edge of the property, one in a larger section of the yard. Both had been buried deliberately. Both had been there for months. Forensic analysis confirmed what investigators already feared. The remains belonged to JJ Vallow and Tylee. But here is the detail that made this even more horrifying. Tylee's remains had been dismembered. Her body had been burned and cut apart before burial. This was not a panicked act. This was calculated. This took time and planning and complete disregard for a human life. JJ had been found wrapped in plastic and placed in a bag. He was still wearing his... I need you to sit with that for a second. On the same day the remains were found, Chad Daybell was arrested on the property. He was taken into custody in Salem. Lori Vallow was arrested 2 days later in Kauai, Hawaii on February 20th, 2020. That arrest had come earlier on the child desertion charges, but now both faced charges directly tied to the deaths of the children. Let's talk about how the physical evidence connected to the timeline. Investigators established that JJ had likely died in late September. The security footage from the Rexburg apartment was the anchor point. He went in. He did not come out. From there, his body had been transported to Chad's. Tylee's death was placed at around the same time as the Yellowstone trip on September 8, 2019. The photos from that day showed her alive. Forensic analysis of remains and phone location data placed the disposal of her body at the Salem property. Lori and Chad had been living their lives for nearly 9 months with those children buried in the back. Now, here is the turning point that sealed the case against both of them. Investigators obtained text messages, hundreds of them, between Lori, Chad, and Alex Cox. The messages referenced Chad's belief system directly. They used his language about dark and light. And in several messages, the children were referred to using the theological framing Chad had. In that framework, JJ and Tylee had apparently been classified as dark, as zombies, as people whose souls were already gone. That classification, in Lori and Chad's worldview, made killing them not a crime. It made it a mission. Additional forensic evidence tied Alex Cox to the physical handling of the remains. His DNA was found at the burials. The full picture was becoming undeniable. This was not one person acting. This was a coordinated plan carried out by multiple people who genuinely believed they were doing God's work. The question now was whether a jury would believe it too. And what price Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell would ultimately. If you think this case sounds like something out of a nightmare, you are not alone. Investigators openly compared the cold calculation behind these killings to the Chris Watts case, where a husband murdered his entire family while maintaining a completely normal public face. Lori Vallow's trial began in Boise, Idaho in April 2023. She faced 5 felony counts, 2 counts of first-degree murder for JJ and Tylee, 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder for Tammy Daybell's death, plus grand theft and conspiracy to commit grand theft. Prosecutors walked the jury through everything. The text messages, the theology, the burial site, the pajamas. They built a picture of a woman who did not snap, who did not break down, who made deliberate choices, step by step, while posting cheerful content online and telling family members not to worry. The defense tried a different angle. They argued Lori was mentally ill, that she had been manipulated by Chad Daybell, that she was a follower, not a leader, in the ideology that drove these. The jury did not buy it. On May 31, 2023, Lori Vallow was found guilty on all 5. The verdict came after just 6 hours of deliberation. 6 hours to decide the fate of a woman accused of killing her own children. When the verdict was read, Lori showed almost no reaction. People in the courtroom described her as blank, detached, the same expression she had worn through much of the trial. On July 31, 2023, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. 3 consecutive lives. The judge made clear there would be no mercy, no path back. Now, let's talk about Chad Daybell. His trial came separately. In April 2024, Chad faced the same core charges in Boise. His defense team leaned heavily on the idea that Lori had been the driving force, that Chad was a man caught in a spiral he could not control. The evidence said otherwise. The text messages came back into at his trial. Investigators presented communications showing Chad actively assigning dark or zombie status to people around him, including the children, including his own late wife, Tammy. Forensic evidence also confirmed that Tammy Daybell had not died of natural causes. She had been poisoned. Chad had been building toward her death for months. On June 6, 2024, Chad Daybell was found guilty of all charges that included the first-degree murders of Tylee, JJ, and Tammy. He was sentenced to death. This is one of the rare cases in recent American history where both convicted killers received the maximum possible punishment. And for the families of JJ and Tylee, that meant it did not bring the kids back, but it meant the system, this time, finally got it right. But getting it right at trial does not erase the years of warning signs that everyone around Lori Vallow saw and reported, and that the system failed to act on. So, here is where we land. Lori Vallow will die in prison. Chad Daybell is on death row. Two people who wrapped murder in religious language and called it a mission are now locked away. That is the outcome. That is the verdict of the justice. But here is what this case actually means when you step back and look at the full picture. This was not a sudden explosion of violence. This was a slow erosion. Lori Vallow did not wake up one morning and become a killer. She moved through a process that took years, a process that touched dozens of people who saw the warning signs and either were not believed or were not heard loudly. A Woodcock raised the alarm. Former friends raised the alarm. Charles Vallow his concerns in writing before he was killed. Tylee's own behavior in the months before her death suggested she was scared. None of it was enough. Not fast enough. Not loud enough. That is the part of this case that should stay with you. Not just the horror of what happened, but the reality that people tried to stop it. And that next time, because there is always a next time with cases like this, the outcome could be different if we take these signals more seriously. If someone you know is pulling away from family, if someone you know is changing fast under the influence of a new partner or a new belief, if children in your life suddenly become unreachable, trust that feeling. The call. Be the person who is annoying about it. Be K. Wood. If you are in a situation where you or your children are being controlled, isolated, or harmed, please reach out. In the United States, you can contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799. They are available around the clock. They are confidential, and they will help you find a way. If you are concerned about a missing child, contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-843. That line exists because of cases exactly like this one. JJ Vallow was 7 years old. He was still wearing his... Lee Ryan was 16. She had a whole life in front of her. They deserved better, and the very least we can do is remember them by their names, not by what was done to them, but by who they were. A funny, superhero-loving little boy. A fierce, sharp, protective, big sister. That is who JJ and Tylee were, and that is who they will always be. Thank you for watching Abyss of Crime. If this video moved you, please like and subscribe. We will be back with another case soon. Goodbye.